Hey, Rob Casey here with GoSendMe Global. Hopefully, you've just finished watching your Mission to Vision presentation training where you've been able to see how we can really work our way from the vision of what we are believing God's going to do in the field back to where we find ourselves today. We use the example of GoSendMe Global's mission, which is that we are called to serve those who were called out to serve Him. And the vision would be that we would see nationals reaching the nations and communities transformed by Jesus. So we get up knowing what it is we're going to go do day by day in following the Lord Jesus, listening to His Spirit, but in the context of our mission, but it's not aimless. It's moving toward something that we believe is the vision cast for us by the Lord to see that outcome take place. We know we can't do it alone. We know that so much of what's required for that to take place will be something that many believers will have to participate in, and that ultimately it is a kingdom vision requiring the King of Kings to return before we see it all happen the way we hope it will. But there are aspects of it that we can pursue, and even moments along the way where we can say, praise God, it's happening in a place. We can see the vision becoming reality in a particular location with a particular people group. How wonderful and inspiring that is. I think a great verse for this is when Paul said, there's no place left for me to work here. What a statement.
From Jerusalem all the way around to Illyricum. Okay, now, you get a little map. That's right up where Albania is, sort of, the Balkans. So Jerusalem up through Syria, around the corner, through Turkey, over down the east coast of Greece, up the other coast, bang, there's Illyricum. That's a lot of people and a lot of territory. From Jerusalem and all the way around to Illyricum, I have fulfilled the ministry of the gospel of Christ. That's unbelievable that he would say that. And thus I make it my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ has not been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation. But as it is written, those who have been told of him will see him, and those who have never heard will understand. This is the reason why I have so often been hindered in coming to you. In other words, I did have room. I had work to do, but now I'm done. Verse 23, but now, since I no longer have any room for work in these regions, and since I have longed for many years to come to you, I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain. I mean, that is crazy. I have no room for work here. I mean, he left behind Titus and Timothy as pastors of churches, plus all the other pastors he appointed in the churches, and he wrote him and he said, do the work of an evangelist. Why? There's thousands of lost people in this region. Thousands and thousands of lost people in Asia and Bithynia and Cappadocia. There's thousands and thousands of lost people, and he says, I have no room here. I'm done. Now, there's a real simple explanation. There is such a thing as a missionary.
Why is that? Because Paul knew what the vision was that he was heading toward, and he knew what the mission required of him. So, with no further ado, we want to walk through this together because this is an exercise that we want you to work on before you come to Fit Week. So we don't want you to freak out about this. We want you to not feel stressed over this. We want you to make this a prayer exercise, seeking the Lord to best understand how to articulate what your mission and vision is, helping others to understand, to join you in the work, inviting them into what? How do we tell them and invite them into this story with us? You know you're called. How do you articulate that call? This is going to be fun. So I've already been working on some things here on the board, and we're going to piggyback off of what I've already got. Whether this is something that you put a lot of graphics in or a lot of drawings, whether this is something that you make black and white with just words, That's up to you. You do you. You know the nature of your ministry, and you know what you can put together in a PowerPoint presentation. But we're asking that it would be something you could present to us in 5 minutes or less. We want you to be able to articulate the key things along the way, areas where you know you're going to have God intervene, supply something, answer questions, or overcome obstacles and roadblocks, see things multiply, see things get into the hands of others where you finally are able to take your hands off of them. So many important points along the way. So let me walk you through what this can look like. At the beginning of the exercise, if you can articulate what you believe the mission is, that's fantastic. Just what is it that I know that I have to put my boots on the ground every day doing? If you can also go ahead and articulate what the vision is, if you can say, you know what, this is the thing we're after, what would that look like? How would you put that into words? How would you say to somebody, the thing that we believe God wants to do in this place is, how do you put that into words? Write that out at the end of this or at the other side of your timeline for us. Now, what's the very next thing? Working from here, the vision back to the mission, what is the thing that you know is just before that? In order for this to be successful, what has to take place just before that? Is it you need 5 key individuals to be able to take on a particular aspect of the ministry? Or is it that you need 3 house churches in place before this would be able to take off on its own? Now, let me pause here for a moment and reflect on this. Some people have asked, why do you emphasize so much that it needs to be at a point where it doesn't need you anymore? I liken this back to 2 Timothy 2:2, where Paul is instructing Timothy about having learned the things that he's learned from Paul and passing these things on. And he says, to faithful men who will pass these on to others also. So if you look at that verse, you got 4 generations wrapped up in one verse. Paul to Timothy, Timothy to faithful men to others also. So in the vision casting Paul was giving Timothy, he was looking beyond himself and he's looking beyond Timothy to the point where I may not know these guys. I may not know who's being entrusted with the ministry by the time it gets there. I just know that it has to get there. I just know that for this ministry of the gospel getting to all the Gentile nations, we've got to see it multiply out. It's got to get beyond me for it to work. That doesn't necessarily mean you being removed from a location, you moving away. And why do I say that? Well, the same guy, Paul, when he talked to Titus and Timothy, he actually talked about things like, I left you in Crete so that you would get this thing done. He told Timothy, remain at Ephesus. So there's a ministry to those who remain and who are left in a place to accomplish a thing. And there's a ministry for those who are called to go from place to place, people to people, in order to accomplish a thing as well. So I don't want you to hear what we're not saying, that we're saying that this is about you coming off the mission field as soon as possible. No, this is about how do we ensure the biblical model of ministry getting entrusted, for instance, with Titus, that the elders are established in every place in Crete being typically place of 100 towns. So that is a big job, and he could probably spend the rest of his life doing that. And he wouldn't necessarily focus on one particular place that whole time, but many places in a big location. How do you know along the way that it's time to focus in a different direction, in a different population, different villages, etc.? What are the markers that are going to help you to know that? That's what we want you to understand about this, that it's okay that it does something different than maybe somebody else's presentation. This is about where you are perceiving the Lord is saying it's going to have to go in order to accomplish the vision. Now, one of the other things I have found along the way in talking to people about this exercise is that they want to think in terms of just this linear progression, point by point along the way, where this happens and this happens. And if we get this in place, and this will be in place, and this will be in place. I would rather give you the analogy of something growing like a tree. and we want to get eventually to a fruit-bearing work that multiplies out, and it's not necessarily quite so linear. It's okay that branches will come off of this into different directions. It's about knowing when it's time for somebody to be in a place that will continue to manage or lead that direction, when it's time for you to continue to focus on that a little more and on other things a little less. But in the process of doing a map like this, doing an exercise like this, I want to encourage you to include things like big questions. There's a point along the way where you know that God's going to have to answer a particular question. He's going to have to resolve something for you. Now, why is that so important? It's so important because if we can resolve the questions that will exist, the big questions that will have to be answered, we can begin praying for them now. As we're doing the mission, we can be praying toward the questions God will have to answer as we go toward the vision. So you're not necessarily always going to know all the answers or all the progressions, but you can put into place, here's a big question we have. We don't know what God's going to do here, but it's definitely in line of what would have to happen before we could take this particular next step. Helpful. I also want to point you to the idea that there are going to be people who are going to come into the ministry with you along the way, that you're going to have praying for those laborers who are going to join you in the task, continuing in that thing that Jesus taught us to pray in Luke chapter 10, right? Pray earnestly for laborers. How earnestly are you praying for these laborers? But you can put it on the map, some key points where you would hope that God would provide other laborers. You can put along the map where you're going to see a key position in place, someone who is like an elder going to have to serve in a particular church plant, or where an administrator is going to have to be there to help you in the administration process, especially if you're more of a field person. Now, when I think about the life of Paul, and I think about things that happened along his life, I consider the fact that Jesus said, I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. So when you consider that suffering wasn't just happening to him, suffering was something that was a task along the process of getting to the vision. He knew suffering would be required, and indeed he was called to the suffering. I think this is so key when it comes to why he gets stoned and gets back up and goes back to it. Why? I know what my mission is. I know that it requires this of me, and I know it's critical to accomplishing the vision. If all the Gentiles are going to get the gospel, then it's going to require, as Jesus said, that I'm going to go through this suffering, and that's okay. I've embraced that. And that's why we have things like I die daily in his writing. So let me ask you this. What are some things that God is revealing along this path that are the I blank dailies? So let's just be reminded again what's happening here. The mission itself, it's what we're going to put our boots on each day and go to work doing. It's critical that we understand, because when you get up in the mission field, you've got to know what you're about. Know what you're about, and then be about it. So this is why we like people to go through this particular exercise at every success, plateau, and failure. Because then you can look at where you thought you were headed, look at where you really are, and you can make adjustments to those daily practices and disciplines, some of those short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals that you believe God is putting on your heart, as well as what it's going to require in investing in some of the people around you in order to keep the ball moving forward. So remember, if you just start off with the mission itself, and you start thinking about the cool ideas. Sir, I'm called out to serve those who are called out to serve him. Great. But what if those you're called to serve say, I got a great idea. This would be a cool thing to do in ministry. Let's go ahead and do this. Or if this is the financial thing that we're going to have to pursue and you get tripped up on the money aspects of it. What if? It's too easy as you approach this process to let the trajectory get way too off center It's too easy to lose focus. This is one of the reasons I believe that we find people on the mission field returning too early, leaving the field, because they're so overwhelmed with all the what ifs. They're so overwhelmed with all the things that the maybe, might be, could be's are telling them. They're so overwhelmed with what the sea of opinions are throwing at them. And they're so overwhelmed with the call of the needs that they've lost sight and focus of why they're there. And we don't want that to take place in your life. We don't want to hear 2 years from now that you just don't know why you're there anymore. We want to give you some practices now to put in place so that you have a sense of this, as Jesus taught us to pray. Our Father who is in heaven, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We know what the vision is, and we know that prayer is part of the process for us in getting to that. We know what we're going to seek each day from what he taught us too. I want his name to be praised, I want his kingdom to come, and I want his will to be done in this place. Wherever I am, it's here on earth. And I'm pursuing that here on earth would be as it is in heaven. I'm an ambassador of that. How do you flesh that idea out in terms of the specific piece of the stained glass window that he has very carefully cut and crafted and colored you to be in his kingdom? I'm so excited to see what you're going to come up with. It's going to be so much fun. We're going to give you the opportunity to share for about 5 minutes and express simply to a group of your peers and staff here at GoSendMe what your mission and vision looks like. I really hope that after you're with us at Fit Week, you'll have a confidence about being able to go and have a conversation with people, to know where to invite them in on the on-ramps of your ministry, to know where people fit. If you have any questions about this along the way, don't hesitate to reach out. Just go ahead and email us or talk to us on the learning platform. Help us help you in this, and we'll have a good time together when it's time to present everything. Thanks so much.